there, I'm Nancy Burgess of Nancy Burgess Strategic Marketing, and today we're going to talk about SEO 101 for business owners. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. What does that mean? I mean, you've heard that term tossed around. What does that mean exactly? Well, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to talk about some of those things. Just share here, and we put this in the there we go. So let's get started. So we'll talk today about why we want to talk about Google, why I talk about Google when I say SEO, why am I always referring to Google and Google best practices and things like that? What are different ways to get on Google to get your business found? And how does the Google search algorithm work? And how does Google search work? Then what matters to Google? What's important to Google and how we can work with that as business owners? What is SEO? We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then how does your website, social media, et cetera, need SEO? Why is that? And then how does an SEO strategist work? At a high level, not digging down into the details. This is not a detailed webinar for web developers, who dig into the weeds and SEO people, but this is a basic overview, good for people who are some of the marketers, definitely business owners who are taking this at a high level. And then what changes are taking place in SEO? So let's get started. So first of all, why do we want to talk about Google? Well, we want to talk about Google because Google owns different, research says 88 to 93% of all search, whenever somebody quote unquote Googles something, almost 90% of the time, roughly, they're on Google. So Google really matters. Google itself gets about 2 trillion questions a year. And on product searches, Amazon dominates at about, or doesn't dominate, but shares the wealth at about 50%, from between 45 and 55%, depending on the search engine. And some people ask me about DuckDuckGo, and that really only has about 1% of the market share. But you can see here between Google Images, YouTube, and Google search itself, all those search engines, it is definitely very robust. So we look at Google because as Google does, so follow a lot of other search engines. So how do you get on Google? Well, one way is to buy an ad. You buy an ad, and every time somebody clicks, like this is I Googled realtors in Lake Zurich. Every time somebody clicks on this ad that says, best agents in Lake Zurich, we've done the research. Anytime somebody clicks on that, and that costs whoever paid for that ad, it costs them money. It's called pay per click, or PPC. So that's one way to get on Google, is to pay for it, to get towards the top. Another way is to have a Google My Business page. This is so that you appear in Google Maps. And on the left, you can see I have I Googled Marketing Palatine. On the left, you can see a group of different Google My Business listings. And on the right, you see if you clicked into one of those, like clicked into mine here, and you can see what that looks like. And you've seen this, it comes out right up on the top of your phone when you Google something. It comes on the right-hand side on a desktop computer. So you've definitely seen this when you've searched something that looks similar to this. Another way to Google is to Google the company name. So if I put in my company name, then my website comes up, some social media comes up. You can see here, I'm taking up a little bit more real estate because Google decided to break out both my contact and about us. That has to do with some of the settings in there that they've chosen to show. And then another thing, if I Google Nancy Burgess, and you can see there's a whole page of Nancy Burgess's. In fact, I just got a notice yesterday saying that my body was found. There's a lot of obituaries for Nancy Burgess, but just Googling that, you can see there's different directories, social media, different things. So that takes up some different real estate. So that's another way to get on Google. These are all search. This is what we're talking about. So there's ads and there's search. So there's search on Google My Business, there's search for your website, and there's search with directories and social media and things like that. That's all called search when people are looking for something. So how does search work? Well, it's really 3 steps. So the first step is that the internet gets crawled. The second step is that the information gets indexed. And the third step is that it shows results. So let's dig into that a little bit just so we have a clear understanding. So the first step is that robots, like in the case of Google, Googlebot crawls the internet. I'm sure Googlebot is not nearly as cute as this little toy robot, but it gives you the idea that a robot crawls the internet. And sometimes you've heard of that referred to as spiders or crawlers. And what they do is they can crawl from link to link to link within websites and from one website to another and to find content. Then what do they do with that content when they find it? Well, it's like having a whole bunch of different books. How do you find the book that you want? Well, you catalog them. They put them together in like categories. So when Google understands that your page is about X, your business is about X, and somebody Googles for X, they match that up and they say, okay, here's a list of all that, we've indexed all these different things that have to do with X. And there's reasons why they put certain things at the top. So once they have this catalog system, then they return a page and they show the results. And that's what we see when we Google something. So it's 3 steps. The robot crawls the internet. Then the content gets indexed like a library system, matching up like this has this and this has that. And then it shows results. Well, how does it decide what results to show? Like, why does one company appear at the top of the page and another company appears on page, let's say 100 of like 10 search results per page? Well, there's a formula, and that formula is called an algorithm. And the formula or the algorithm decides what to show in results. So I like to think of an algorithm as kind of like a recipe for something like pizza. Right? There's all these different ingredients that can go into it. In fact, the Google algorithm has like 200 ingredients in its recipe. Some of those ingredients are more important than other ingredients. What's more is that Google changes the recipe at least 6 times a day. And that's to deter spammers and other people. They don't want junk coming in. They want people to get, when they Google X, they don't want them to get Y or Z or porn or something else. So they want to make sure that when people Google X, they get X. And so they change the recipe a little 6 times a day, a little more salt, a little less pepper, that kind of thing. So, but it's still pizza, right? It still ends up being the same thing. And there's some ingredients that may be more important than other ingredients. Well, links are important because, as we said, the bots crawl the links. So if you have bots crawling the links, then those are going to be more important. Also, another thing that's very important is content. Google cannot read images. That's why we put a special kind of text on an image called alt text, so that if the image can't be read, it says, crown over cell phone or something like that. So that's representing content. The reason I have a crown on there is because there's Bill Gates famously once said, content is king. He said that back in the 90s. And content is king because having content tells Google what the page is about. And it tells it through words and it tells it through code. So those are a couple of factors that are important there. And then rank brain. Rank brain's very interesting. Rank brain is the automated intelligence. So with the links, as we talked about, we have the internal links between pages. We have the external links, like let's say somebody links to your site. So Google may be crawling along and then a link goes to your site. So then they crawl that site. They say, oh, this site must be important. A lot of people put links to this site on there. But the links have to be relevant. They have to have expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness each. So like a link from Facebook to your company or a link from LinkedIn for your company page, that has more authority than, let's say, a link or a link from, let's say, the New York Times has more authority than, let's say, a link from, that is irrelevant. So don't get fooled by spammy link buying strategies. Those were something that used to work back in the day, but Google is wise to those and they will not help you. Not in the long run, and you could get dinged for that and have to remove your website altogether. It might get removed. So we talked about how the content needs to be relevant, X to X. It needs to be valuable, and it needs to be high quality. It has to have expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness. So if I sat down and I wrote a medical article about how to treat a cold, that's not going to have a lot of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. Now, if I was an MD and I was an infectious disease specialist who knew all about viruses and colds and things like that, that would have a lot of authority and a lot of trust. So that's the kind of content that you want to have, your expertise. If you're an expert in X, then your website should talk about X. The other thing that, and I mentioned this just briefly, is the artificial intelligence. And this is really pretty cool. Google has learned over time that, like, if someone says horse, then they most likely are looking for like a thoroughbred or something like that, that they're probably not looking for like a construction horse. But if someone types in construction horse, they may get back a sawhorse, content on that page. It's also learned Apple, like Google the word apple. You probably will get things about a computer, not a red or green piece of fruit or yellow. And then it understands conversational language. It's getting better and better. And if you've ever used other search engines, you'll find Google really knows pretty well what things are, what people are looking for. And the more people like what you post and go to it, the more that Google will think, well, this must be the good answer because the person went there and they stayed there. They didn't go there and then leave and try something else to keep trying to find the answer. This must be the answer. When they Google X, this must be the answer. This must not be, something else may not be the answer. And so that gets put further back on a different page while X gets on the first page. So what are some other ingredients in our pizza recipe? Well, your site should be mobile friendly. Most searches, about 57% or so on average, are done on a mobile device. So therefore, you want to have a site that is mobile friendly, and Google ranks those sites actually solely now for mobile friendliness. So if your mobile site, if you have content that's on your desktop site, but not on your mobile site, it may still be on the internet, but it won't appear in a search engine return page. Other ingredients, it's really important, and this is becoming more and more important, is that your site must be fast. It must load quickly. People are not patient, and Google wants people to have a good experience. So that's another ingredient. Another ingredient is that your site needs to be secure. So that would be having like an SSL certificate. And you can see I put like the little lock that you see for my website on there over here. So that's the little lock that you see in the search engine return. And if it's not, it'll say not safe. And it's been saying that for a long time. So one of the things that they're looking for is that you have an HTTPS site, not just an HTTP. So what exactly is search engine optimization? I mean, how do you get to X? So we know some of the ingredients in the recipe. Well, the goal of search engine optimization is to create unique, relevant, and valuable content that has expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. That's both easy for search engine robots to crawl and index, or the spiders to be able to crawl and index, and for users to find, navigate, and consume. And you do that by applying certain best practices. You're trying to match the recipe as closely as possible. And yes, the recipe changes a little bit each day, but if you have the major ingredients, it still turns into pizza and you still are able to optimize. So there are best practices with the web development, how your site is designed, some coding that you put behind the scenes and on the page. So the way the links are on the page and things like that. Content creation, like how robust is the content? Does it say enough? And then to tell the bots understand what this page is about so that it knows. And is the page something that people are looking for? If you're writing about something that nobody cares about, you're not going to rank. And then after you launch your website, you need to kind of integrate it with other factors, not just search engine optimization. You want to put your link and your signature line for your website and things like that. So why bother with all this? Well, on a desktop, there's a saying, where do you hide the dead body? You murder somebody, where do you hide the dead body? Well, maybe you've heard this before, but it's on page 2 of Google. Of course, this may seem like, well, that's not the same anymore with scrolling on a phone, but it still holds true. If you're on page 2, you're going to get a lot less traffic. Here's a graph that's been around for a while. It shows the blue line here is desktop searches, the red line is mobile, and you see 95% of people won't click past the first page, and 2/3 won't click past the first 5 search results. So if you want to be relevant to Google, the higher up you are on that page, in general, the better it is. Now here's some more modern data. This is taken recently in 2021, and it hasn't changed all that much. There's a little bit of bump on 11, so like you do a little bit better at the top of page 2 than you do at the bottom of page 1, but basically it's about the same. And just to say what we're looking at here, on the horizontal axis, we're showing the position on the page. So this is the first thing that you see on the search engine return page. This is the second thing. This is the third thing, and you can see, and this is the number of the percentage of people who click. So almost 40% click on that very first link. So that's why it's really important to be on the top. So one reason that you want to be on SEO is because you want to rank higher so that you get found. So why did the SEO strategists cross the road? To get hit by traffic. So you want to get that website traffic, and that's what SEO strategists look at. So getting more traffic is one reason to get on SEO. And another reason is that the prospects will come to you. The competition is doing it. So doing SEO. So if you want to get that traffic too, you need to do SEO as well. Otherwise, you're going to end up buried on page 200 or something. If you build a website, they won't come. It has to be a search engine optimized website. Just having a website isn't enough to generate traffic. And then, you want to get a return on your investment. You pay for a website depending on, if you're a small business, maybe you pay, for a one-page website, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a small business, up to, $20,000 for a small business. Big businesses may pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a website. And if you want to get a return on that investment, why build something that nobody's going to go to? You want to make sure you get the return on that investment. So you get the ROI on the website itself, but you also get an ROI because you don't have to pay as much. This is cost per click for different industries. You can see you can pay as much as $5.88 for one click on a legal search, for one click on employment services, like a job listing, $4.20. So these are not cheap things to advertise. So you can offset some of those pay per click costs by getting just that kind of free search engine optimization. So you spend less on ads, so you can decrease your PPC costs. Another thing is that there's a good ROI on SEO. Different studies have shown different things, from $5 to $8 return on investment, but you can see only email marketing Only email marketing beats the SEO, beats SEO for in terms of digital marketing tactics and what you get for return on investment. Also, so this is another ROI study. It showed that Google AdWords, in this case, they lost 95 cents per click, but the profit for SEO was 275 or 375, so the profit was 275. So subtracting that dollar roughly, and then or $2, and then or $1, excuse me, and then it pays for itself and more, and the ROI is excellent. It's a long-term investment. So that's another reason to do it. It's not like a one and done. It's not like you put up a billboard and you take it down and it's over. It's not like somebody clicks on that ad and then it's over. It continues. If you do the right optimization things, it will continue to pay dividends because you're matching up what people want. And as long as you keep giving people what they want, then it will be the right things on the page. And it pays dividends for years to come. So the Google algorithm, as I mentioned, favors mobile-friendly, responsive design, fast, secure, that it clearly communicates to prospects and customers. These are all things that an SEO person does to try to make sure that things match up. Another thing that we do is we want to make the site so that's making it user-friendly. Another thing we want to do is that we can help get the ads. We can help, not ads, we can help sales by a lot of times people will Google before they go on in a store and purchase. I mean, not for a stick of gum, but for a larger item that they want to purchase, they'll look online first. They'll come in ready to buy. So having that, having your products or services online to say what those are, even in a brick and mortar setting, is helpful. And it can definitely warm leads for your website, for your sales team. And then you get qualified. So that's how you get qualified leads. And then one more thing I want to say is, you are hitting people right when they want to know something, right when they want to get answers, or right when they want to get information about your products or services. It's not like a billboard or something else where, or an advertisement on TV where maybe they're not looking for a computer right then, but there's a computer commercial. These are people who are like ready to purchase. They're saying, what's the best computer to buy, that kind of thing. So what are some of the other things we talked? So we talked about the goal of SEO. Content is huge on that, and creating relevant content. What we do for an SEO audit is that we figure out what content is doing well and what content is doing poorly in terms of getting ranked and getting attention from consumers or the business, if you're business to business. And then we look at what the code, the metadata behind the scenes says. We look to see if you're a local company, if you have local directory listings and consistency, like can Google tell that this is the same company, that you're the same company every time you're listing, or is it confusing because there's other companies with similar names, and or you have listed yourself in different ways in different places. And then we can see what traffic is coming from organic as well as from social media and things like that. And when we look at how each page is performing and those keywords that are performing well on it. And then we do keyword research. We look at, we want to understand the audience's language. And I bolded the word audience there for a reason, because a lot of times, businesses will use lingo that their customers won't use at all. So you want to use very natural language that people remember too. A lot of people are doing voice search. So you want to use very natural language that people actually might say when they're Googling something. They're not going to say, where can I find strategic marketing? That kind of thing. But they might say, where can I find digital marketing? So you want to have the kinds of language that people are using. Or how can I get help with my Google? Or how do I rank on Google? These are the kinds of things that people are actually asking. So we would do that for each of your business. How would people Google it? We do, we use some keyword tools to find more keywords that people are looking at. And then we query the words ourselves, see what's coming up, because perhaps what you think is, let's say you're trying to sell red apples, and every time you have, you say you're an apple orchard, you want to make sure that you come up and not the Apple computers when people are looking for you. So what are prospects and customers asking? These are good things to know. These are good things to have in your content. If customers are asking you the same questions over and over, or prospects are asking you the same question over and over, then maybe that's a good thing to put on your website and answer that question for them. So we do the keyword research. It looks something like that. And then we do use keywords appropriately when we're naming URLs. And I caution you there, because if you start changing a whole lot of URLs, that's going to be a problem. You don't want to change. If you can be consistent with your URLs, if they're in the right place and they're named correctly, or not to change everything all at once, you're going to really lose SEO. Title tags, meta descriptions, these are some of the coding underneath. Not the title tag is not the title on the page, but the H1 is the title on the page and other headings. And then the special text I was talking about on images to say that this is what this image is about. I'm selling toasters, and this is an image of a toaster. I'm a sole business proprietor, and I am John Smith, not I am, the picture named face. So the image, the file name of the image, and the alt text on the image should say like John Smith, CEO of John Smith Incorporated, that kind of thing. And here's an example of like one of the tools we can use. It's called Yoast, and it shows like when you're in the green that you are doing well there. Oh, I saw corn. That means there's a corny joke coming up. So why was my new client turkey.com stuck on page 20 in the SERP, in the search engine return pages? Well, why was that client on there? Because they were keyword stuffing. And that's an expression. Keyword stuffing is when you use a whole bunch of different words to say the same thing, and you keep repeating it over and over again, or you just like have a list of words. Those are all spammy practices, and Google is way beyond that now. They will actually your site. So you think, oh, if I just put all these words on there, then my content will really look like X. No, because Google knows when you're not talking naturally. So you want words and titles and all these different things to read naturally and be a natural style. And then I have some other content here about, not having, now you want to avoid duplicate content, but Google understands that some things like your brand messages and stuff may be on more than one page. That's not a big deal. I think especially the bottoms of the pages need to be, can be more duplicative. Like if you have a footer that's across all your pages or things like that, that's fine. But these are some things to avoid: irrelevant naming, lengthy titles, keyword stuffing. As we mentioned, that's stuffing a whole bunch of keywords on there. And then, there's some best practices for this description, so that this is the description that gets returned. So we want to have it read smoothly, and it really should be something that makes people really want to click on your thing. Here's one I found. It was like a speaking thing. It said, learn the secrets to confident and effective public speaking, download free guide, improve your sales skills. Oh my goodness, there's just so many things. And it doesn't have to be full sentences. But these are the kinds of code and things that an SEO puts on. And then the meta descriptions, there's some things that we avoid doing. So this is kind of what I was talking about. This is getting a little bit more in the weeds. But you do want compelling, unique, fresh content. These are all the different things that an SEO strategist works on. And a large volume of unformatted text or typos and grammatical errors. You want to avoid all these things that are, rehashing the same content over and over again. You want to be as original as possible, and but also answering questions that people have. So there's studies that show that more content is better, but I put the little red man on there because Even though studies have shown this, Google over and over again says that it's not the number of words on the page, it's the context and the being able to answer the question. Another piece of corn, so we got a corny joke. An SEO writer walks into a bar room, a tavern, a pub, a watering hole, an ale house. So that would be keyword stuffing by using all those different words that mean the same thing. But you want to pick some of the ones that are naturally that people are Googling. Are people in the US really Googling, where's my ale house? They're going to say, where's the nearest bar, or where's the nearest tavern, things like that. And so we can do our keyword research and know which words actually people are searching the most. And then you want it to be readable. So most Americans don't read. A lot of them don't read past the 5th grade level. Usually we try to stick below an 8th grade level to hit the majority of people. If you're like a medical research site or something, obviously the sophistication is going to be a little higher on that, but shorter paragraphs, shorter sentences, bullets, things like that, avoiding passive voices, just good writing practices. And that's why, as me having a background as a writer has been really helpful in doing SEO, because I can do those things. And then the images, do and don't. So you don't want to use your images as links. You want to try to have the file name and the alt attribute, that special coding on the image all match up. And then I just want to talk a little bit about algorithm changes, because we mentioned that it changes 6 times a day, but there are bigger algorithm changes all the time. And one is coming very soon. It's called the Page Experience Update. And the Page Experience Update was supposed to roll out this month, which is part of the reason I was focusing on SEO this month. But Google has delayed it. They're going to start rolling it out next month. And it requires that a site be both be secure and so it has HTTPS, that it's mobile friendly, that it loads quickly, that there aren't any like annoying pop-ups. It's called there's going to be an intrusive interstitial penalty, which means you're going to be penalized if you have annoying pop-ups that occur interfere with the original content. Like if you're going to have to put a pop-up on there, like let's say for legalese, you want that to be more towards the bottom of the page and not interfere. And then you want to, if you have like consistent infractions where your browsing isn't safe, then you will be penalized for that. And then core web vitals, which are what they call is loading performance. So how fast does it load? So that's called the largest contentful paint. And there are numbers that go with this. So, and there are ways that, that SEOs and web developers can see this data, how quickly you can interact with it. And does it bounce around when you load it? So those are the 3 things. They have fancy names like first input delay and cumulative layout shift. But there's like a green, a yellow, and a red area. And of course, you want to try to be in the green and all of those things. So we answered the questions. Why talk about Google? Google controls 93% of search. What are different ways to get on search? Well, there's the paid per click ads and search. Search includes Google My Business pages. It includes your social media and directory listings, and it includes your website. And how does Google search work? It crawls, the robots crawl, then the Google indexes the content to organize it, and then it returns a page based on its formula or algorithm. And an algorithm is like a pizza recipe. It has 200 plus ingredients that determine rank and what the search engine return page looks like. Excuse me. What matters most to Google? Content, links, rank brain, speed, mobile friendliness, some metadata, not all the coding data underneath, but some of it, and user friendliness. What is SEO? It's some best practices that allow robots to crawl relevant, valuable, and user-friendly content and to easily access it. It's content that it's making sure there's content that demonstrates expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. And why does your website or social media need SEO? Well, if you rank higher, you're more likely to get traffic and to demonstrate expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So your competitors are doing it. You can cut costs, you can gain ROI, you give people what they're looking for at the time they're looking for it. You qualify leads, to make sure that they're good leads before you send them to the sales force. There's security, and it's a secure site, and it's a user-friendly site. So there's a lot of great reasons to do SEO on a website. And then how does a strategist work? Well, we start with the keyword research, and we write content aligned with what bots need and users want to know, and also put the proper coding on there and what changes are taking place. The page performance update is coming. So I'm happy to answer any questions. There is a guide with some other links. There's a great video if you're interested in this topic. It's called like Trillions of Questions. It's on this resource. It's free. You can go to my website and download it and get the link. And it's called Trillions of Questions, and I think it's on YouTube. And then you can watch that and find out a whole lot more. Reach out to me if you want. I'm offering a special. Oh, I don't think I'm allowed to talk about that because I'm not allowed to monetize. But reach out to me and be happy to talk about your needs and help you with anything. Thanks.